Hello, my friends. So, I'm going to show you guys how I make bread. I make bread in a weird old school Italian way because that's who I am. Anyway, so it starts with this thing called a biga. What is a biga? Well, I'll show you what a biga is. It is basically a sourdough starter. Now, yeah, that doesn't look the most appetizing, right? I know, but it's not supposed to. Forgive the light there, because this is what I got. I'm using my cell phone. It's propped on a roll of kitchen towel. Anyway, the biga, you start it the night before, if you're just starting a brand new one. I used 330 grams of flour, about 200 mils of warm water, a gram of yeast, 40 mils of water that I dissolved the yeast into. All right. So you mix that all together with some oil in a bowl, and you leave that 6 to 48 hours. You can leave it when you're first starting it. I like to go like 12 to 18. It leads to a sort of not sour taste, because we don't want sour. But what we do want and what we do get is a nice sort of funk to the whole thing. It sounds weird, trust me, it's okay, right? So what do we do next, right? Once we've got our biga, kind of set and worked up, it'll get all foamy. You saw it got all foamy and all sorts of, I'm just turning on the oven here, all sorts of huge in size. What we got to do is start making the autolays, the sort of the pre-ferment, or rather, the pre-baking of the bread. So we've got our biga, which is about 600-ish grams of flour, water, and yeast. We're going to add another 350 grams of flour to it. Each half cup measure is roughly 100 grams, which is good to know because my scale turned off and I'm now just kind of eyeballing it. I'm giving exact measures, but really you do kind of get to eyeball it once you know roughly what you're doing. And knowing roughly what I do is what I do best, roughly-ish. Right. So we've got 350 or so grams of flour in there. We're going to add about 200 grams of water. Just tap water. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. All right. Now, you might notice I'm not adding any more yeast to this. There is a very good reason for that. I'm going to get a little bit more water. This first bit that we're doing is, it serves like 3 different purposes all in one. One, it's going to let the biga continue doing its thing, right? It lets the biga continue to grow. It lets the yeast, the naturally occurring yeasts work. It also lets us save some for the next batch. And yeah, we are going to save some of the biga for the next batch, because once you make a good biga, it's functionally immortal. You can freeze the sucker, take it out a couple hours before you're ready to bake, take a chunk of it, use it in the bread, and then throw some of the autolays into another Tupperware, back into a Tupperware container, throw it back in the freezer, and you're done. Right? So I just stirred this. You saw how long I stirred this for, right? Like 15 seconds tops. Right? Take a look. Let's get that here. Oh, you're not going to let me flip around, are you? All right, fine. So here's what the autolays looks like. All right. Hope you can see that okay. Yeah, you can. So we're going to let that sit half an hour. Yeah, half an hour or so, till it roughly doubles in size. Now the way we're going to do this, we're not going to add any yeast. We're not going to add any salt. Not yet. Because adding yeast will mess up the biga, right, that we're making for future use. Adding salt will kill the yeast, right? So we don't want to do either of those things just yet. So we get some plastic wrap. I hate plastic wrap, just because it sticks everywhere. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is stick everywhere. But it sticks everywhere. You know, it's the devil's epithelials, right? Like, it's just flakes of terrible skin from Satan himself that stick on everything, and it's awful. Anyway, so you scrape off your spoon, throw it in the sink. We're going to need to give that a wash because, well, one, we'll just need to wash, but two, we'll be using that again in a bit. Cover this up nice and loose with some plastic wrap. Grab yourself a knife. Slicey. And I will be back with you in about half an hour or so. I forgot to add, you should, while the autolyse is autolysing, right, in there, and it'll double roughly in size in about a half hour ideally. What you should do is get another 40 milliliters or 40 grams of water and throw a gram of yeast in there. Give it a stir and let it do its thing. Walk away for a bit. Just walk away. Walk away. And then come back in, well, now we've got 26 minutes. And then we'll get on to the next step, which is where the magic happens. Because baking is basically wizardry. It's alchemy. There's no other way to explain it. All right, my friends, it has been 26 minutes since last I saw you, which means it's been now a half an hour that the biga has been doing its thing. Let's take the plastic wrap off and take a look. That's roughly doubled in size. Right? Yeah, I'd say roughly doubled. Which is what we wanted. Now, let me just get this thing back there. Now what I'm going to do is, first, I'm going to save some for the next breadification. How much? Man, who knows? I sure don't. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a knife. I'm going to cut out a chunk of dough like that, or biga rather like that. I'd say it's about that much, about a gym handful. Let's measure that out. Weigh it out. That is about, well, hot damn, that is 230 grams exactly. So yeah, save yourself 230 grams or so. You know, make it a little bit more. Make it an even 250. Make it a quarter kilo. $280. Good enough. Good enough for me, I mean. All right, so now you got your hands all covered in dough, like a fool. You don't need your knife no more. Now I can hear you asking already, Jim, why are you washing your hands if you're just gonna get them covered in dough again? Well, I gotta first off put the lid on my Tupperware container, which is Jim's Biga 080119, 280 grams of this stuff. I'll mark that it was 280 grams at some point, and I'm going to toss this in the freezer. Now, in the future, when we want to, you know, do baking stuff with it, all we got to do is take that out a couple hours, 3 hours ahead of time, let it get up to room temperature, it'll start getting all bubbly, and we're going to be right on. All right, so next step, we are going to zero our scale, because right now it's saying we've got about, well, well, let's see. It's saying we've got about 1,400 grams of flour and bowl there. That bowl weighs about 500 grams. I know this, but mathing is hard. And I don't want to math right now. So we'll just let the thing zero. Come on. There we go. All right, so it's zeroed now. We're going to add another 200-ish grams of flour. That's another, basically a cup of flour. So it's 107, 175, 190, 200 even. Like I know what I'm doing almost. All right, now we've got to add our yeast and our water, that mixture there. All right, and we're gonna add some salt. Now I got this fancy dancy French sea salt for another completely unrelated baking thing that I'm going to be doing probably tomorrow before I go to work, but that's tomorrow, and that's for other reasons. So we're going to put some salt in. How much? I don't know how much you want. You definitely need salt. This is the one time when measuring it isn't going to do you much good. Just do what Nana does. I'll go by the eye. 4 pinches. Maybe 5. And then we've got it, this mess here. And we're going to get to kneading it. Right? This is where, if you're gluten-free, this is a bit of an issue because this is where we make the gluten works for the dough, so we get it nice and, well, doughy, right? So we can make it into bread. Now, if you are gluten-free, there are plenty of gluten-free substitutes for flour. Sorghum flour, from what I have seen, you can use 1-to-1. If that is not the case, I will put a note somewhere in the doodly-doo down there, or in the doodly-dee up here. I don't know. But, now, I added a lot of flour in here. I added 200 grams of flour. Right? It is not all going to go into this dough. I mean, ideally it will, eventually, but this is going to help keep the dough from getting too sticky. Sticky's good. We want that stickiness, we want that sticktivity to the dough, because that's going to turn into a delicious, and I mean delightful, crust. Because crusts are the best part of these sorts of breads. But we're going to need that until we get a nice smooth and elastic dough going on. What does a smooth and elastic dough look like? Well, we're going to find out in about 10 minutes or so. Now, you can, if you really want, take the flour, or take the dough out of the bowl and put it on the table. I'm going to put this down here, and you can get some, and there we go, I'm going to move out of the way, or move into the way of the light, and get some, old-fashioned kneading it on the table, countertop sort of deal, but that gets kind of messy, and I'm really lazy, and so instead I'm just going to knead it in the bowl, like this. And we're going to keep on going for about 10 minutes. You don't need to see this, but my hands are covered in dough at this point, so I'm not going to stop the recording, but we'll give maybe one of those SpongeBob title cards several minutes later, because it'll take about 10-15 minutes of kneading. It's going to be super boring, and I apologize. This is really important because it does make for the gluten, which makes for a loaf that keeps its shape and whatnot. Actually, you know what? We're gonna be lazy and do something else really cool, right? So now This dough is getting there. It is nearly to the point where I'm getting confident in calling it elastic. It's only been about 3 or 4 minutes, but I knead really well. I have done this before. Nana has shown me the way when it comes to turning flour and yeast and water and oil and salt into something delicious, whether that's bread or cake or pasta, or, well, you don't put yeast in pasta. Yeah, it's just flour and water. Eggs if you want to get really fancy and have like super fresh pasta that you got to eat immediately. But, you know, if you want to do it the way Nana does it, it's just flour and water, and then you dry it and you can have it, or freeze it and you can have it all year round, or several months round at least. All right. So, dough is coming together, and now we've got to do what's called the second rise. This sucker takes about an hour. So right now it is 3:38, which is fine. So still got plenty of time. Now the dough is still kind of damp, and that's fine. We don't want it dry. We will probably add a bit more flour in a bit once we've got the second rise down, just to dry it out. But what you want to do, I will show you how you can tell your dough is ready for the second rise. Just 1 second here. All right. This is Nana's trick. Right? And hopefully it's going to work. So, see the dough, see the thumb, put the thumb in it. Starts coming back. You're ready for the second rise. So get your plastic wrap back. But before you do that, Nana doesn't do this. This is purely me. And I do it just because I like olive oil. Get yourself some nice dark olive oil. Pour a little bit over top, not too much. Roll it around so it's nice and coated. This way also it keeps it from sticking to the bowl. Nana doesn't really oil hers. I don't know how hers doesn't stick, but as we all know, Nana is some sort of domestic minor deity who can basically do whatever she feels like, and it will always work out because that's Nana and that's what she does. Anyway, so now it is all oily and bouncy back. Cover this sucker up, and we'll be back in a half an hour. Nobody ever said making bread was quick. It's easy as hell once you start realizing what you got to do. Super, super easy. But she does take some time. It does take a bit of an investment. It's just the way it works. Back in an hour or so. Yeah, I'll see you in about an hour. And we're back. So, this is the last step. This is the proofing step before we bake it. Yeah, I know, there's a lot of process involved. Making bread's easy, but it ain't quick, right? You know how it works. You can get cheap, fast, and easy. Pick two, right? Cheap and easy. That's what we got today. Just like me. Anyway, the bread has doubled in size. Let's take a look at that. Right. So yeah, it has doubled roughly in size, which is awesome. And now we're going to proof this sucker. What does proofing mean? Well, it means first, we punch this sucker down. Punch it down, make sure there's no excess air or anything like that, because that'll create pockets which will be unpleasant when we start eating. Not unpleasant, it's just, it'll fuck up the crust. We don't want the crust to be fucked up. So we throw this onto a baking dish, or baking sheet, that's the one. Form it into a ball, just like this. Just keep on stretching, pull it nice and tight. Pull it nice and tight, there we go. And look at that. It's almost like I know what I'm doing, at least when it comes to bread. Videography, not so much, not with this phone. But, you know, win some, lose some. Anyway, so what I got over here is I've got my oven preheated to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. In degrees science, that's 200-ish. Again, I'll put the conversion in the doodly-doo or in a note or something somewhere. But yeah, not quite maximum super hot because this oven is not the greatest and it will burn out the oven and that's just unpleasant. But also we don't want it maximum super hot anyway because we're not like making a pizza or something. We are making delightful bread. So now we've got this sucker nicely formed. That is a sweet looking loaf of bread. We got to do two more things. We got to proof it, which means we basically let it rise again, right? And we got to slash it, right? So slashing it does a couple things. Oh Jesus, that is an unfortunately placed light. Anyway, slashing it does a couple things. One, it allows the bread to grow bigger, right? Cook faster, right? And two, it looks real nice. So put three sounds about right. Check her out. All right, so we got 3 slashes there. And yeah, we're going to proof this, which means we're going to cover it in kitchen towel or a cloth towel. I have a cloth towel in the place where I keep, you know, towels and stuff. Cover it, put it beside the hot oven, not on top of it because that'll start cooking the bottom and we don't want that just yet. Put it beside it so it's warm. That'll let it rise a little bit more. We'll do that for another half hour or so. And then it's going to go into the oven at 450 Fahrenheit, 200 and some change-ish Celsius. It's a weird Canadian thing, I know. I would prefer to know it off the top of my head in Celsius, but we're fucked up here. Anyway, and I'll be back when I throw it in the oven. And then it'll bake for like 40-ish minutes. And then once that's baked, and up to about 205, about 100 degrees Celsius on the inside, like 96-ish Celsius on the inside, we will know it is done. I'll also show you a really fun, cool way of knowing when it's done without having to like jab a hole in it to get the temperature and thus maybe letting all the steam, which is cooking the inside out. And right, anyway, covering, proofing, back in a half hour. So our bread is proven. It's done the thing where it got real big under a mumpin' head. So this is our loaf of bread. Check that sucker out. Right. I don't think it's too bad. Hopefully you guys could see that because, again, I'm real bad at this videography thing. Anyway, so we've got a 450 Fahrenheit, and again, for real degrees, oven, which we're going to chuck this sucker into for 40 minutes. And during that 40 minutes, hopefully that's when the magic's going to happen. Alternately, everything is going to be terrible, and I'm probably not going to post this video. So if you see this, things worked out. If you don't, fuck it, nothing matters, right? Okay. All right, so it has been about, I gave it a little longer, I gave it about 45 minutes. And our bread, look at that sucker. It has burst like an alien. That's probably not a great analogy and doesn't make it particularly appetizing, but I assure you, this is the sort of bread you are going to want to eat the crap out of. Maybe that's also a bad thing to say. It is going to be delicious, trust me. Anyway, so it's done. I know it's done because I heard it tell me it was done. Is this just another incident of Jim being a crazy old man? Well, probably, but this is how you can tell if your bread is done a really easy way without having to like jam a thermometer, a temperature probe, like one of these into it. Right. So what we're going to do, now this is really hot and I might curse, and if I do, I'll edit it in post, but suffice it to say if there is some jaunty music in between, I am swearing up a storm. That wasn't so bad. So what we do is we've got this sucker turned over, and now take a listen. That actually doesn't really help. This is going to be complicated, so I'm going to do stuff now and things. Okay, so we're going to do the bread now. It's really hot, but listen to this. Hollow sound when you knock on the bottom of it, that is the sign of a done loaf. So we're going to leave this on the counter over here to cool down because it's still cooking in the inside. It is like a piece of meat in that the heat is carrying over with the cooking, and the steam inside is going to make sure that it's nice and well cooked all the way through. But we're pretty much done. We'll let that cool for like a half hour or so because that'll be, one, enough time to make the fish soup that's going to go along with it, and two, just enough time for everything to be ready for, consuming without burning our mouths to cinders, which is not a thing you want to do. Anyway, that's that for bread. Dead simple. I'll show it to you when we cut it open. It's going to be great, I hope. And if it's not, again, you won't see this video, so it will not matter. Okay, my friends. So, while the soup is going, this has had time to cool off. I'm going to cut into this, and hopefully it is going to look delicious, and if it doesn't, again, you won't see any of this. So let's see. Oh, hell yes. Check it out. Right. It smells delicious. It is nice and soft on the inside. I mean, I would have liked to have maybe left it in for another 5 or 6 minutes to get really super crunchy crust on the outside, but that gets on the verge of burning. Right? If you want it crispier, absolutely do that, but here we go. Look at that loaf of bread. Right? It looks magnificent. I'm super relieved that it didn't foul up and that it tastes really good. In fact, really, really good. Anyway, I'm going to go put this on the table because the soup's just about done, and you'll see that in the other video.